Hello everyone, and welcome back to YouTube's sexiest filming background. Today we're going to be doing the Get to Know the Fantasy Reader book tag. I figured since I've had a steady increase in subs, I should do like a more about me type video where you can kind of get to know me a little more. I think these questions are pretty interesting. I can get some good discussion out of them. So thank you so much for watching and joining me. I hope you're having a good day, evening, morning, wherever it is you're watching me from now. I hope you're well and enjoy this video. Honestly, I feel like a lot of children's books that I read growing up could be classified as fantasy, but the specific book that really, made me feel like I am a fantasy fan after I read it would probably be The Inheritance Cycle by Christopher Paolini. And honestly, it's not even the book itself that made me feel that way. Basically, like before I read it, there was this place called the Inheritance Forums, a internet forum dedicated to the Inheritance Cycle, and it had a ton of people on it. They would all just discuss books and music, and honestly, I think like 80% of my personality was formed on these like early era like internet forums. And yeah, that's where I heard about Wheel of Time for the first time. That was kind of like my early education in fantasy. And even though I would say that the Inheritance Cycle isn't like the best fantasy series ever written, or even like the best YA fantasy series ever written, I still have a really nostalgic place in my heart for the series because of that. And also beyond the Inheritance Cycle, I really loved Ella Enchanted by Gail Carson Levine. That was just a beautiful story, and it has a nice romance to it, but at the center of Ella Enchanted is of course Ella, and as a protagonist, Ella is just a fantastic character, and her inner conflict and her sort of rebellious nature, I really loved that as a kid. Another one that I really enjoyed was Princess Academy. I think Shannon Hale wrote that, and I think I read one sequel, but I never read the rest. So I really want to go back and reread the Princess Academy and see if it holds up after all these years. That can be kind of dangerous if you like go back and read a childhood favorite and you like find out that it was actually pretty bad, and then like it ruins your childhood a little bit. But I think Princess Academy will hold up. But yeah, The Inheritance Cycle, Ella Enchanted, Princess Academy, those are probably the biggest ones that I remember. I think the fact that I remember them now without like having to think about it really hard is probably indicative of how influential they were on me. Oh my god, all my favorite authors treat their main characters terribly, so this is a very difficult question. But actually, I would want to be a main protagonist in a Terry Pratchett novel. I always say this, but he has a lot of compassion for his characters. Even when he writes like villains, I think he really gets into their head and he understands like why they're villains and why they're sort of bad people. So I think that if Terry Pratchett were to write me in a novel, it would be really interesting to read. I don't know, like I think he would just write a really great caricature of me as like a really clumsy sort of introverted person. I don't know what adventure I would go on, but I guess for the trope that I would insist on, I would definitely insist on the found family trope. That's like my favorite trope of all time, and I love reading that in books. So if Terry Pratchett were to write me in a novel as a sort of introverted, clumsy person who like stumbles onto an adventure and like finds a bunch of friends along the way, that would just be a dream come true. And obviously 2021 is quite young, but I have read a couple books this year already, and one of those has been The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin, and I am a terrible read-along host because this was supposed to be the read-along book for the month, and I was supposed to read it like over the course of January, and I've already finished it. But honestly, it was just so good that I could not stop myself from just binging it in like 2 or 3 sittings. It is just one of the most compelling stories I've ever read, and I mean, I started off 2021 with a bang because I cannot imagine any book that I read this year topping it. I mean, I'm gonna be reading the sequels too, so maybe those will be better, but yeah, it's just this very searing story about motherhood. It's set in this very apocalyptic world. The fact that each book in the series won the Hugo Award, and that's never been done before, should be testament to how fantastic this series is. But yeah, I think The Fifth Season, everyone should read it. I mean, genuinely, it's one of the best explorations of systemic oppression that I've ever read. And yeah, I think everyone could just stand to read this book and learn from it. So my favorite fantasy subgenre is definitely like just, I don't know, a heroic fantasy, like, you know, the typical hero's journey, like all that. That is just my shit. I love that. A subgenre I haven't read as much from, but I definitely want to in the future is probably magical realism. That is a subgenre I don't know much about, but it kind of intrigues me, and it's definitely got a more literary flavor to it. So yeah, magical realism is a subgenre that I really want to get more into, and I haven't in the past. I feel like authors write really slowly. So like I have a ton of favorite fantasy authors that I would auto buy, but it's only because they come out with like one book every 5 years. But if I'm gonna be basic, an auto buy author for me at this point is probably Brandon Sanderson. Even though I didn't buy Rhythm of War when it came out, but like I know that I will. And once I catch up on Cosmere, I know that I will probably eventually buy every adult fantasy book that Sanderson puts out, because it will probably be a part of the Cosmere. Like I don't know if he's gonna ever write adult fantasy that's not part of the Cosmere again. Usually I just find them on Reddit. r/fantasy is probably the biggest place for me. That's where I found Robin Hobb. Though technically I found Robin Hobb through YouTube, but it was like because of like all the recommendations on r/fantasy that I actually ended up buying her book. That subreddit is also great for like self-pub recommendations. And of course, all my friends here on BookTube, I look to them for recommendations all the time. I'm crying just a tiny little bit because when I looked up like anticipated 2021 releases, Doors of Stone came up and I was like, don't do that to me. A book that I'm excited to come out in 2021 would be, I guess, A Desolation Called Peace. Even though I haven't actually read A Memory Called Empire, I think I'm going to be reading that next month for February. That's probably going to be my read-along pick. I say probably because the voting hasn't closed, but it's currently in the lead by quite a bit. By the way, join my Discord if you're interested in doing that read-along. I think 2021 seems to be a chiller year in terms of releases. 2020 had so many big releases like Rhythm of War, The Burning God. A ton of books came out in 2020, so I feel like 2021 is a little chiller in terms of releases, but yeah, I guess that's one that I'm gonna be looking out for, and I'll probably pre-order it too. Adult fantasy isn't as inaccessible as some people think it is, and I think that sometimes there can be like a sort of gatekeepery culture around series like Malazan or Wheel of Time, just because they're super long that, you know, it's gonna be really hard to read and like hard to get into, and you're like gonna forget everything. But really, I don't think that's the case. My friend Rachel put it beautifully in her review for The Eye of the World, and she said that if you think you would enjoy those kinds of stories, then you can read them. Like, so the first one that I would recommend would be A Wizard of Earthsea by Ursula K. Le Guin. It's a classic, so I know that it has like some level of quality, even though I haven't actually read it myself yet. But I know that it'll at least have some sort of literary value, even if the person doesn't end up enjoying the story itself. And it's really short, so it's easy to get through in that regard. The second book I would recommend would be Mistborn Book 1, The Final Empire. It's part of the Cosmere, so if they end up enjoying that series, they can, you know, jump into the deep end and just go for it and read the entire Cosmere, and they'll have a lot of fun doing that. But if they don't like it, you know, it's not a huge commitment to like have to read the whole thing if they want to find out what happened. You know, they can just read like Mistborn and be, you know, reasonably satisfied. And for my third and final pick, I'm gonna go for a recommendation, a personal recommendation from the heart, and that's gonna be The Eye of the World by Robert Jordan, because it's my mission to indoctrinate as much people to read The Wheel of Time. So all right, that's it for my tag. I hope you got to know me a little better from this, and I hope you enjoyed watching this. Also, I forgot to mention this at the beginning, but no one tagged me to do this. I just kind of decided to do it of my own volition. But anyways, thanks for watching and take care. I will see you in the next video. Bye!